Hi, it's Jan Howell here with another DIY sewing tutorial. Today we're working with fleece again, and I'm going to show you how to make these cozy headband ear warmers. I'm going to show you how to make them with a contrasting binding and just regular. Make sure you watch to the end of the video where I'm going to show you some different ways that you can embellish your headbands with tags and a few other fun things. Let's go over a few items and things that you'll need. What I love about these fleece headbands is they don't take a lot of materials or supplies. You'll need your fleece fabric, or you can use an upcycled fleece piece of clothing like I love to do. You'll need your pattern printed, downloaded, and cut out. Some straight pins or fabric clips if you have them, a pair of fabric scissors, a measuring tape or ruler. A rotary cutter is handy to cut out the binding strips if you choose to do that. And you'll need your sewing machine or a serger if you have one. They sew up really quick if you have a serger, but not necessary. I'm going to show you both ways. The first thing you'll need to do is to cut out your pattern, and because of the large size of the pattern, you'll need to assemble the pattern first. Real easy and quick. I have threaded my machine with the same color of thread and wound a bobbin the same color of thread as my fabric. And I'm going to set my sewing machine stitch to a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch. Now this is really important, or else I'll show you in just a second what will happen if you use a straight stitch on stretchy fabric. So most machines will have this lightning bolt symbol stitch. That is going to give you a back and forth stitch that will allow stretch and not break. If you don't see that on your machine, you can just use a regular zigzag stitch. And every sewing machine, unless you have a really, really, really old machine, is going to have a zigzag stitch. And you can just set that stitch to a 2 width and just maybe a 1.5 length. So I have folded the fleece so it's doubled, and the stretch is going across. I'm going to make sure, because if I were to lay this out on the fold this way, it wouldn't. See how that is just not stretching, where this is really stretchy. So make sure you're folding the fabric, doubling it over with the stretch. Take the pattern and place it on the fold on the end where it indicates that. Just line that up with the edge of the fold. You just need to cut one out. So I'm going to open that up and place the right sides together, folding them in half lengthwise like this. You can either use pins or clips. And instead of sewing right from the edge to the edge, I'm going to come in about 2 inches from the edge and start sewing. So all the way to this point here, leaving 2 inches on this side. So if you want to, you can take a pin and just place it about 2 inches from the edge, so you make sure that you're not sewing past there. So I'm just going to start at that point and sew around. The seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch, or you can use smaller if you want to, 1/4 inch, but it's usually just the edge of my presser foot is what I usually do. You want to back stitch at the beginning and the end of your seam. Now we're going to turn it inside out. To hide the seam, this is a really tricky way to do this, is we're going to bring the right sides together and just sew, and we'll just, as we sew, adjust it till we sew to the end. It's not hard, it just takes some just adjusting. So we'll just open that up. So I'm adjusting it as I sew. Bringing those ends together. So you just open that up, pull it, and you have your headband, and all you have is this little hole. The seam allowance is hidden. It's really quite a tricky little thing. Now, just pull out your corners, round those corners by pulling out the seam allowance, and we'll top stitch that. So we'll just fold that underneath a 1/4 inch, and then this a 1/4 inch, and bring those seams together. Just line that up. You can use the sewing machine, or you can use a slip stitch. I'm going to show you how to do a slip stitch. This is a good opportunity for you to learn that. It's a good thing to learn, and it's quite easy. So if you prefer to just do the top stitching, you can skip this part. But if you want to learn how to do the slip stitch, I'll show you how. So I've double threaded a needle, and I'm going to knot the end. Just wrap it around my finger and roll it and pull, and that will make a knot. I'm just going to come to the opening and slip my needle towards the end of the opening and poke it out right at the end of the opening. So my knot's inside there. Just tuck my thread down in, and I'm going to be sewing, taking little stitches on the top of the fold, just back and forth. So I'm going to stick my needle in to one side, just in the fold, poke it out, and then come directly across the opening and poke my needle in and take a little stitch in the fold and pull it out. And I'm going to do this just all the way down, taking little stitches in the top of the fold. This is a slip stitch, or sometimes it's called a ladder stitch. See those little stitches? So when I get down to the end of the opening, just poke it out right there at the seam. I'm going to take an extra little stitch, leave a loop, and I'm going to wrap my needle around it a couple times and then gently pull it, and it will make a knot right down on the edge of the fabric. And so I'm going to poke my needle in between all the fabrics, poke it out just somewhere, and pull it, and then I'll cut my thread. It's just a little more finished look. Like I say, you can always just top stitch those. Oh, that opening closed. So you could actually just leave it like that, or you can go to the sewing machine and top stitch right along the curve there, and I think I'm going to do that. And you can just use a straight stitch for this. Make sure that you've pulled all the corners out. Roll it with your fingers. And then we can top stitch. Just going to start in the back. And there you have it. Now I'm going to show you how to make a headband with a contrasting binding. I have cut out a strip of fleece on the stretch 1 3/4 inches by 18 inches, and the length of the binding will be on the pattern for what size. I'll set that aside and just cut out my headband first. Again, placing it on the fold. We're going to jump right into the back headband seam. So I'm going to bring the right sides together and sew that back headband seam. So I'm just going to show you on the serger and show you how easy it is to use, or you can just use a straight stitch on this back seam. So I've serged that back seam. I'm going to open it up and bring the right sides out, facing out. Line up the back seam. Fold it in half and mark that front center point with a pin. Take your binding and place the right sides together and sew that end together. And I'm going to mark the center point with a pin on the binding as well. So the back seam is going to be lined up with the back seam of the headband. Pin that in place. Right sides together, and the front center points lined up and pinned in place. So the binding piece is going to be a little bit shorter than the headband. That gives it a snug fit. So you'll just be easing that in as you sew. And it's not a lot smaller, but so you'll just take it to the sewing machine, starting at the back, and sew all the way around. Take your time, and we're going to use again that stretch stitch. Now, or you can use the serger, which I'm going to do. And when I get to the beginning, I'm going to just pull it over just a little bit so it's not cutting the existing stitch, but I'm going to overstitch it and then pull it off. This is what is really cool about using this fleece for binding. I have another tutorial that goes over specifically just how to bind things with fleece, but I'm going to show you the technique here. So we want to fold the seam up towards the binding and fold it over the top. We want to make sure that the seam is folded up and not down, and pin it or clip it in place all the way around. So the beauty of fleece is it's not going to fray, so I don't have to fold it under and hem it like this. This makes it so you don't have a lot of bulk, and I'll show you the technique of stitching in the ditch, I call it. So we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and with a straight stitch I'm going to bring my needle down just in the crevice of that stitch and then sew right in that ditch all the way around, and then we'll trim off the excess. So it's a pretty slick, clean, really nice finished edge. Get back to the beginning, back stitch. Pretty cool. Now let's flip it over, and you can see how this excess, no worries. We're going to take our scissors, open that, flip it so the back side, the inside is out, facing out. And I'm just going to take my scissors and slide it underneath and flatten my scissor against the back of that headband so I can just trim as close as I can without cutting the stitching to trim off that excess. So I'm just sliding my scissors as I cut. So that's what it looks like on the inside of the binding, and then we'll flip it out and look how nice that looks. Nice, cozy, snug headband. Lots of different color combinations that you can work with. Let's go over some fun things that you can do to embellish the headband if you wanted to. You could add a cute flower. These are made of fleece. I also have a tutorial for that, how to make these cute fleece flowers out of felt, or this is even fleece. So you could add those to the front of the headband, really cute. I have a tutorial on how to make your own labels, fabric labels, and I have just applied them with, you can see how I've just done a short zigzag stitch, the same color as the tag, all the way around, and that's just on the side of the headband. Make a pair of fleece fingerless mittens to go along with it, and you have a fun little gift. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you can be updated on new classes and tutorials. If you're new to sewing and would like to learn the basics of sewing, all the details, step-by-step instruction, stay tuned for my upcoming Sew Simple series course, where you'll learn all you need to know to start sewing now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.